Hello, and welcome to the Gaming with Science podcast, where we talk about the science behind some of your favorite games.
Welcome back to Gaming with Science. This is Jason, and it's just me today. So right now we're technically in our mid-season break, but to make sure y'all have something, I want to introduce you to a bunch of scientists I met at the Maize Genetics Meeting back in March. And that's maize as in corn, not maize as in puzzles, although of course you may have been to a corn maze, which is actually a maze, and yeah. Anyway, one of my goals with this podcast was try to show the human side of scientists. We see a bunch of things in Hollywood where scientists are all uber nerdy or geeky or have no social lives, and I want to show that scientists are human. We have interests, we play games, we have fun. And so when I was back at this conference, I wanted to show off what real scientists are like. And so I grabbed a microphone and started grabbing some people and just talking with them and asking them questions about how they got into science, what games they like, how we could turn their research into a game, that sort of thing. So many thanks to the people who let me interview them: Brianna, Chip, Jacob, Kate, Kyle, Lauren, and Mohammed. I'll let them all introduce themselves in a little bit. To keep things from getting repetitive, I spliced all the interviews together. So you'll hear me asking one question, but then you'll hear a bunch of them in turn, even though they were recorded at different times in different places. You'll have different amounts of background noises depending on where we were and how much stuff was going on at the time. Also, you probably guessed that being a Maize Genetics conference, corn genetics, everyone here works on corn. If you like this, we'll try to do a few more. We'll maybe get some other ones. So without further ado, I'm just going to let everyone introduce themselves, and I hope you enjoy this. Okay, so first off, can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Brianna Griffin. I'm originally from Florida, but I'm actually at Iowa State University, where I study molecular plant pathology.
Yeah, I'm Chip Hunter. I work for the USDA Agricultural Research Service in Gainesville, Florida.
I am Jacob Kelly. I am a PhD student at the University of Missouri.
I'm Kate Eastman, and I'm a graduate student at Purdue in Jen Wisecaber's lab.
Hi, my name's Kyle Swintowski. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in David Jackson's lab at Cold Spring Harbor.
I'm Lauren Witt. I'm a postdoc at the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center, just recently graduated, and I'm a plant genetic researcher.
My name is Mohammed El-Walid. I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate at Cornell University, working in Ed Buckler's lab.
So what got you into science in the first place?
I've always been interested in science, but it's a kind of an interesting path, though. I actually went to an art school for middle and high school. Like, science was definitely not the focus at our school, but I just always really enjoyed it. And as I continued to advance in it, I actually started to see science as a type of art form. I just thought it was very interesting and very creative, but in a completely different way than like I was used to seeing with like the dancers and the painters and stuff like that. And so actually when I started in undergrad, I actually thought I was going to go to med school. And I luckily joined a program called Women in Math, Science, and Engineering at Florida State University. And they're really big on getting people more involved in research like earlier on. So my sophomore year, I actually started working in a maize genetics lab, so corn lab. As I was doing that at the same time as doing everything for pre-med and working at the hospital and stuff, I realized that I really enjoyed science a lot more than healthcare. Nothing wrong with doctors, we definitely need them. But at least for me, science just seemed so much more interesting. It was a lot more creative of a field. There was a lot more options like to do kind of what you wanted to, and each day is very different. And so that was something that was really appealing to me.
I was on track to become a dentist like my father. I was studying for the DAT exam in college, and I took a course, and it was called The Seeds of Change, and it was taught by an agronomic professor, but it was all about genetic engineering in crops and plants. That one course changed my trajectory because I was so impressed by the possibility of plant genetic engineering to improve agriculture, but really to improve the world. I think it still holds such great promise. We've seen cool successes. Some of the examples that I was impressed by were, turf grass that could be irrigated with salt water, roses that never wilt, fruit that doesn't spoil, those kinds of sorts of things.
So, let's see. I wanted to be a vet growing up. Where I was from, scientist wasn't really a thing you could be. You could be a science teacher, or you could be a vet, or you could be a nurse. And I'm not good with blood. I'm very queasy, unfortunately, as much as I loved animals. So I was like, I'm going to be a science teacher. And so that's what I went to do. And I took a genetics class and I really liked it, and I just went and talked to the professor. Hey, do you have room in your lab? Can you just teach me how to do this stuff? Like, how do I extract DNA? How do I isolate a gene? Doing PCR, that kind of stuff. And she had a really cool project for me to extract DNA from ancient permafrost up in Alaska, like 50,000-year-old soil samples, and get to try to characterize what the plant populations looked like across Alaska as it changed during the Pleistocene. So, the unknown aspect that I was like, wait, we don't really know what that is. And she's like, well, we have theories, but we don't have the DNA, we don't have the proof yet. And it's like, oh, I get to do something that no one else has known about. Like, I get to contribute something new.
Actually, initially, during high school, I studied more computer science. I always had an interest in science, but I didn't really think I'd be good at it necessarily, or really think that I didn't really know what a scientist looked like. And so it never really occurred to me that that's something I could actually do. But my elder sister was taking this genetics class during her undergrad at the University of Missouri, and the genetics professor that she was with requested some field help from some students, and my sister agreed and asked if she could bring me along. And this was the summer right after I graduated high school. So I went with her, and we were talking about heterosis and things like that, and it was kind of captivating, the genetics, and starting to understand it a little bit more and understand what kind of questions you can ask and what it really looks like to be a scientist and to do science. And so instead of going to computer science, I switched to biochemistry, and I found this nice avenue where I can do a lot of computational things for genetics, and now I do.
Okay, and what's your research on?
So generally, I would say that I do crop improvement. So I work on diseases and working on plant immunity. So you know how you have an immune system with humans? There's also one in plants too, but it's a lot less defined at this point. And so I'm trying to help figure out that so that we can make stronger plants so that we just have better crops for the future.
I do a lot of genomics work. We're trying to map freezing tolerance in this wild relative of corn called Trypsicum dactyloides. A lot of what I've been doing is trying to figure out how we parse through all this genomics data, this genetics data that we have, and try to identify causal genes related to Trypsicum's freezing tolerance so that we can introduce it into maize.
I study maize genetics and especially focused on defense chemistry, the regulation of defenses against insects and pathogens by plant hormones.
We look for places in the genome that are different across populations, so just genetic variants, and then we can link that to changes in what we see in the plant, so changes in their traits. And my research is to try to narrow that down to the genes that are actually responsible for that. So just because there's a change at a certain part in the genome doesn't mean specifically that we know which gene that's telling us is the causal gene that's actually changing, making the plant taller, making the plant shorter. And I guess the reason I got into it is because I found out that we actually don't know what all the genes do. So I actually might be able to discover something new, and that's exciting to me.
So I study primarily two different projects. The first is a sea slug that steals chloroplasts from the algae it eats and uses its chloroplasts to photosynthesize. And then the next project is actually maize insect interactions, as well as a wild grass called Soteria viridis, and investigating the impacts of different caterpillar on plant defense responses.
I use molecular machines to move large segments of DNA from one location on a chromosome to another location on a different chromosome. It's proof of concept research to show that it can be done. One of the major problems that plant breeders run into is having different genes of interest located on different chromosomes. If we're able to insert a large segment of DNA into a plant, and that large segment of DNA has lots of genes of interest, and then we're able to move that to a specific target site, then not only can we partially control the expression of the large segment of DNA, like the genes located in it, but because it's all incorporated in the same spot, it inherits together.
In my research, I'm interested in the differences between annual and perennial plants. Annuals are really good at growing and taking everything they've produced in their life and putting it into what's going to be harvested, whereas perennials have to be able to recycle their nutrients and keep growing year after year. So I'm trying to figure out how that process actually works.
So what are some of your favorite games?
So my favorite game is actually chess. I got into chess when I was a little boy. My dad taught me how to play chess, and he and I would stay up in the evenings and we would play a game or two of chess, sometimes 3 before bed. And it was a fun way for my dad and I to bond with each other.
How long was it until he stopped letting you win and you were legitimately just beating him?
So I don't think my dad actually ever let me win. He would kick my butt. He would absolutely wreck me when I was like 4 or 5 years old. He could beat me in just a few moves. And then as I got older and more experienced, it got to where I would win about a third of the games. And then after I left for college, I kept playing with other people that I met that also loved chess, and I got better. And my dad, he kind of stopped playing because he didn't have anyone to play with. And so now whenever my dad and I play, I return the favor from when I was 4 or 5.
My favorite game of all really is Magic the Gathering. I think the strategy and constantly evolving game type that it is the most fun for me. So I've played that game for quite a long time now, about 20 years I think.
I primarily love a game called Spirit Island. Other than that, classic board games, things like Monopoly, Risk, and thinking of more modern ones, I really like Ecos lately and Mariposas. They're both kind of the same board game producers, kind of animal interactions and things like that.
I think right now, I mostly it's a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, mainly because there's not a whole lot of prep time for me, at least, that has to go into it. So
You're obviously not the GM.
no, I am not the GM. I'm in 2 campaigns, and one of them started in like 2020 and is still going on right now. And it's a bunch of actually other graduate students and former graduate students. Some of them are real faculty now and join remotely. But we've been playing for a few years now. It's really a really good way to kind of take the edge off, enjoy some time with friends, and think about science actually in like a different context really a lot of the time, because I feel like especially with something like Dungeons and Dragons, you have a lot of creative free will, and sometimes you can use the things that you know to help you.
So I'm into both board games and video games. Video game-wise, some of my all-time favorites are Age of Empires, Civilization, some first-person shooter games. And then as far as board games go, I've lately been into this plant molecular biology game called Cellulose. But I love pretty much any board game you could throw at me.
And so if we were to take your research and turn it into a game, what would it be like?
I probably would say that it would be an open world adventure where it's kind of a choose your own adventure. There's an overarching goal, but at the same time, there's a lot of different pathways you can take to like reach the end goal. And there's also a lot of side quests you can do that maybe distract you from the main mission, but still may be interesting and still may get you some cool results along the way also.
So is that one about your research itself, or is that about being a graduate student?
Probably both, honestly.
It'd honestly be probably pretty similar to the evolution board game, where you get to evolve your species to outcompete with the people at the table for limited resources and give them certain traits and kind of like play with the population size and like the animal size and how much resources they need. So I really like that aspect of it, but trying to make it more like evolution and actually adding the random part into it. I actually had a teacher in undergrad who taught us a lab that way where he added in random aspects to it. So maybe adding a little bit more of the plants back into it instead of like, animals are always fun, but maybe more of like, growing like your plant population and competing for maybe underground resources.
I've worked a lot with horizontal gene transfer, which is non-hereditary passing of genetic information. So I've looked into these fungi that live in trees and pass genes between the trees that they live in or other plants. And I also studied the sea slug that we expected had stolen some genes from the algae it eats so that it can support these chloroplasts. So it'd probably be different organisms stealing components of other organisms.
Sounds like you'd be stealing bits and pieces from other players' creatures and trying to make the best one.
Yes. Yeah, kind of like Spore. If you ever played that game on the computer, you're making this organism and slowly evolving it and adapting it to its environment. Yeah, that would probably be my inspiration.
And I assume we have some aspiring scientists among our listeners, so what sort of advice would you give to them?
I would say focus on what you love, and then as you focus on the science that you enjoy learning about the most, you will come across people that can point you in the right direction for not just learning more, but actually getting involved in the science and being able to push the perimeter of what is known and ultimately make discoveries and discover things related to what it is that you are interested in.
just stay passionate about things. I have always loved science, but when it becomes your job, you have to remember to separate your love for something from your hatred of a 9-to-5 or your dislike for school or things like that. So just kind of looking back at what got me passionate about science and what I really love helps me to stay committed and stay driven.
It's much more doable than you think. There are a lot of challenges along the way, and then also you do get paid for your PhD. You don't have to pay for that. So I think that was something that really I didn't realize until I started working in a laboratory and didn't know that was a thing. And then also, I think that the most important thing is really to make sure that you can maintain good relationships with your advisor and with your colleagues, and then that you also have like a good balance outside of work, because it really is just like more of a marathon than anything. And I think that transition from undergrad, where everything did feel like a race, to kind of slowing it down and just trying to keep taking slow steps forward was a challenge for me initially.
Yeah, dive in early as you can and try to find a place that you can have freedom to play, to learn, and to do experiments. My personal philosophy is with students is to really let them take a stab at leading experiments and design experiments.
If you really love what you're doing, keep going with it. I know it's going to be a lot of hard work, but the dedication you put into it with anything in life will really pay off later.
Definitely talk to your professors. I didn't know that was a thing that you could do until one of my friends told me that she was working in someone's lab. And so it's like, yeah, just go up and talk to a professor. They're normal people. They have first names. A lot of professors I know like to go by their first names. Actually, a lot of them are going to be really down to earth and also want to pass on, like, I'm sure every scientist had a previous scientist that inspired them when they were a student. At least for me and a lot of people I know, it's like wanting to pass that forward, and just showing that you're interested is like all we need. It's like you don't have to know all the stuff. You don't have to know how to do DNA extraction. You don't need to know how to use R or Python. I can teach you that. But if you have the desire to do it, then, that's really all we're looking for. And we're all just a bunch of nerds, really. So we love sharing common interests and, what makes us passionate. So, don't be afraid to, I guess, show that side either. That I guess there's a stereotype about scientists being a certain way and being, only concerned about their research and very serious and very analytical. But a lot of us are really fun. We have other outside hobbies. We have fandoms that we like to do, sports that we like to do. And so just talk to a scientist and figure out if it's for you.
And I can't really top that. So thank you very much to Brianna, Chip, Jacob, Kate, Kyle, Lauren, and Mohammed for letting me interview them. Thank you for their sharing a little bit about themselves. And thank you to y'all for listening. This episode was a bit of an experiment. So if you have strong opinions about whether we should do this again or not do it again, go ahead and jump on the Discord and let us know. Link is at www.gamingwithscience.net. You can get the invite there. Jump on, talk to us. We're really friendly people. Get on, let us know if this is something you want us to do more of. And with that, I'll go ahead and wrap it up for now. Y'all have a great week, happy gaming, and have fun playing dice with the universe. This has been the Gaming with Science podcast, copyright 2024. Listeners are free to reuse this recording for any non-commercial purpose as long as credit is given to Gaming with Science. This podcast is produced with the support from the University of Georgia. All opinions are those of the hosts and do not imply endorsement by the sponsors. If you wish to purchase any of the games we talked about, we encourage you to do so through your friendly local game store. Thank you, and have fun playing dice with the universe.